Peace, family. Happy Wu Wednesday. For this episode of Tang An American Saga, separating fact from fiction, we're going to examine the question as to whether Raekwon was really homeless. Let's get it. In season 1 of Tang An American Saga, it pretty much shows the relationship between RZA, or rather Bobby, Raekwon, who in the show his name is Shah, and Ghostface Killer, who we know as Dennis / D Lover. Although there are other members present, the main, the main conflicts in the show that occur between these three characters. And the conflict stems from a neighborhood beef between two warring projects in Staten Island, which Wu-Tang later refers to as Shaolin, but it's Staten Island, a borough in New York. In Staten Island, there's a neighborhood called Park Hill, and there's another neighborhood called Stapleton, and these are two housing projects that are not far from each other, so they're rivals to each other. Shah, or Raekwon, is a prominent member of Park Hill projects. He's a hustler. Same thing with Dennis, or Ghostface Killer. He's a prominent hustler in Stapleton projects. And so there's a rivalry between the two. And season 1, pretty much, it kind of shows us this rivalry. Of course, it's embellished for the big screen, but it gives us some snapshots and some ideas to how the rivalry went. The question that we have today, because in showing all of their rivalry, it also shows a lot of what was going on in each of their personal lives. And in Raekwon's personal life, it showed that he was homeless. It doesn't show why he was homeless, how he got homeless, but it shows that in his daily life, because he still functions in his regular life, he still hustles, he still dresses nice, he still has the things that, that a hustler wants, like, really nice clothes and jewelry and so forth. But by all appearances, to everybody he comes among, they don't know if he's homeless or not. He keeps up appearances well. However, at the end of the night, he goes to sleep on the roof, and he has a closet with a lock on it where he stashes all of his belongings, his gun, his jewelry, his money, his work, etc. So, and by work I mean the product that you push in the streets. In the street, we used to call it our work, but more on that later. But anyway, this is the way that it showed or depicted Raekwon. And later, because I don't want to go too much into detail, because again, right now I've given away some spoilers to some people, but so I don't want to go in every detail and completely narrate the entire show. You need to, if you haven't saw the show, you need to go and watch the show yourself. Mainly, I just want to give you the context of this video and what we're going to address. The question, was Raekwon really homeless? So it came to a point where Raekwon was presented with an apartment by his associate. In the show, his name is Power. In reality, we know his name is Oliver Grant. For those of us who wanted to do the history on Oliver Grant, he was one of the members of Wu-Tang management. But on the show, his name is Power. He's a hustler. He's a big time hustler in Park Hill, and Raekwon is pretty much his lieutenant. He works for him. At a certain point in the show, Power presents Raekwon, with an apartment, and Raekwon is very happy to receive this apartment because Power, he knew that Raekwon was homeless. Raekwon didn't know, or rather, Shah didn't know that Power knew that he was homeless, but he was grateful anyway at Power thinking of him and getting him an apartment. But what Shaw didn't know was the apartment that Power got him was actually a crack house, or rather a trap house, some people call it. And as Raekwon lived in the trap house, he would also run the trap house and make money from it as well. He had initially you can see unease in Shaw at that, you know, at that offer. Um, it kind of was depicted that way because in the first season, it's pretty clear that the antagonists are presented as Shaw and Power. So Shaw is really considered like a major antagonist because of his mentality towards the streets and how he doesn't allow emotions to dictate his decisions or his relationships. So he views everything as a hustle, and it almost seems like they wanted to present it as, this is your friend, but and he's homeless, but instead of getting him a real apartment, you subject him to living in a crack house. Now, this is an embellishment from Raekwon's real uh, story in a number of ways. First, we need to establish that yes, Raekwon was homeless at a certain point. He had a falling out with his mother, which resulted from her boyfriend saying some things about him that he overheard. Raekwon in his book From Staircase to Stage, um, which just came out November 30th. For those who are interested, and is in all stores and on multiple platforms. However, and it's a pretty decent read. There's some criticisms that I definitely have for it, but in terms of information, um, it serves as a really good companion to this show because a number of the issues and a number of the things that occur in the show are actually addressed in the book. I don't think it's intentionally addressed, but a lot of Raekwon's story that he talked about in the book actually found its way onto the screen. Uh, not in not in the form that it actually occurred, but in a form that that definitely articulated the main points of what happened. So in this case about Raekwon being homeless, he was homeless, but in reality, like we said, he had an issue with his mother's boyfriend, who he felt didn't care about him and his siblings. And although Raekwon does state that he was running the streets, he was selling drugs, he was using coke, he was doing all kinds of grimy things, robbing, you know, dropped out of school, all of that. And his mother's boyfriend was aware of that, but he said some things about him to his mother that he overheard and that Shaw didn't appreciate, or rather Raekwon didn't appreciate, and he addressed it by cussing the guy out in front of his mother, and his mother attempted to stop him from using the language he was using and cussing the guy out, but he proceeded to continue to do it, and showed a form of hostility to a point where his mother put him out the house. So after his mother put him out the house, he went to go and live with a crackhead. Well, he described her as a career crack user, in a sense that he distinguished her from a typical crackhead, where he said a crackhead doesn't care about themselves. They stop respecting themselves. However, the career crack user, who he called Marie, who he went to live with, still managed to maintain a regular lifestyle. She didn't completely go over the edge. So when he went to live with her, um, she also lived with her boyfriend, and while Raekwon was there, he kept a lock on the door, just like in the show. He kept a lock on his door, and in his room he kept stashed his crack, his gun, just like in the show, his jewelry. Eventually, as crackheads will do, They broke into his room and they stole $300 worth of drugs, his gun, and his ring, his gold ring. So he eventually had to end that situation. Now, that home, of course, that he lived in wasn't a crack house. Yes, it was the place where a crack user lived, but he wasn't selling drugs out of that home. But when he moved with another crack user who was a friend of his mother named Terry. In her home, he described her as a sophisticated crack user, where she had a nice apartment, um, and all of her friends were kind of high class clientele. His cousin Unique was using her home already to to cook up and bag up his work, and he would also sell to her high class clientele. So her home was a trap house of sorts. But when Raekwon moved in with her, him and Unique put together, he got involved with Unique's business. Unique had been selling drugs previously, and and it was actually Raekwon's initial look into the game, but he never would allow Raekwon to get in the game because that's his cousin and he didn't want to deal with his mother and so forth. But in this case, Raekwon was already in the game on his own, so he accepted him to come in with him. And so when he came in with him, he actually lived in the crack house, and they served to Terry's high class customers. So I say all that to say, yes, he did. He was homeless. He did live in a crack house, and just like the show, although in the show it was Power that had provided him the crack house as an apartment to stay in. In this case, it was somebody. It was still somebody he was close to, his cousin. But the dynamic of him living in a crack house and him working and hustling out of that crack house is definitely true.